would like to welcome everyone and thank you so much for joining our first Inclusion Insights free webinar series. So today is about leading inclusion through resistance and navigating the backlash. So I am Isabelle Pujol. I'm the founder and CEO of Pluribus, which is a global D&I consultancy. And at Pluribus, we strongly believe in a world where everyone belongs. So for the last 18 years, we partner with global organizations, local organizations to make inclusion real. And we do that through strategy, leadership, and honest dialogue. Before that, I was one of the first D&I managers in Europe as I was working for BP. And that was in the other century because it was in 1998 when I started to work on the topic. So this webinar is really special, not only because it's the first one of a series, but because Dr. Rohini Anand has kindly agreed to be our special guest. So I had the great privilege to work with Rohini when she served as a senior vice president, corporate responsibility and global chief diversity officer at Sodexo. And you were, Rohini, directly reporting to the CEO at that time. And now you are the founder and CEO of Rohini Anand LLC, and you're advising global organizations on the diversity and equity and inclusion. So I'm a big fan, for me, but also for many people around the world. I know that you are recognized as a D&I pioneer because you have not only the strategic thinking, because you act as a strategic business leader, you are wonderful when you speak, you give a lot of speaking opportunities, you're a board advisor, you had won numerous awards, and of course, you're also the author of a very well-known book, which is called Leading Global Diversity, Equity and Inclusion. And that's a really important guide for systematic change in multinational organizations. So I highly recommend this book because it's full of insights, especially with practical tips. And you will find the link in the chat. So really, thank you so much, Rohini, for sharing your wisdom and your energy, your positive energy with us today. We're going to have an open dialogue. I know sometimes a webinar, it's a series of presentations or you have a panel discussions. Here, it's really a very honest dialogue, having some questions, mainly questions that came from you, participants, because as part of the registration process, we ask you, what kind of issues you were challenged with and, whether you had some questions. So we try to put together 4 themes. One is around the backlash and the shift. One is around the framing, the language, the trust. One is around ownership, action and champions. And one is really the business impact and the way forward. So regardless of who you are, your role, where you're based, we are all challenged today. Every day something else is coming up. So it's not only D&I that is facing resistance. The moment, there are some budget cuts, there are polarizations, political pushback, wars. And I know that organizations are struggling. And us as D&I change agents, we are struggling because, we are asked to defend, to adapt, sometimes to pause our efforts. And especially in organizations, leaders are asked to adapt as well and to pause their efforts. So the reason why we wanted to have this dialogue is to remind ourselves that inclusion is not a trend. It's really a long-term commitment and a business imperative. So if you're with us today, all the participants, is because you really want to lead with integrity and you want to create space for others. So no buzzwords today. It's really about, real stories, practical insights, and commitment to doing the work. So we are not perfect, but we will try, with bravery to do it together. So I don't know how many people, before I ask some questions to Rohini, I don't know how many participants are here at the moment. I think around 56, which is already a huge number. So we want to ask you where you're calling from. And Diego, who is our Pluribus moderator, is going to show you on the screen a QR code. Maybe Diego, do you want to say very quickly how it does work?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Good to see you. So I invite you to scan the QR code that you see here on the screen. If you don't have your phone with you, you can also scan the QR code. You can also access through your browser with your computer through the ahaslides.com link. And then on the top right of the screen, you will be able to actually access the activity. So I'm going to still share the QR code for the ones who haven't been able to fill it up so far. And we're going to give you a few seconds to answer the following questions. So where are you dialing from? Are you in Europe, in the Americas, Asia, UK?
So indeed, we have participants from various parts of the world, which is wonderful because this is really, what we were aiming is having this global conversation, especially with Rohini, who has this deep expertise in global D&I. So I'm very glad to see all the different regions that are, part of the conversation today. There is a second question that we would like to ask you, which is very straightforward. I see the current climate around D&I as an opportunity. Do you see it as an opportunity? Yes? No? Or maybe you don't know. So let's see, because I'll be able also to share with you some statistics from the last global D&I forum that took place in London. There were about 350 participants, and it was interesting to see their results. So I don't know, Diego, whether you can put this number into statistics or only numbers.
So I don't have
That's okay.
exactly I'm not
worry.
able to do it right now.
No, don't worry. So, when we asked the question in London, it was early May, I think, 77% I responded to that question with a yes, which in a way, based on what we have on the screen, the big majority still say yes. And that's very reassuring that, yes, indeed, we can see what's going on at the moment with all the pushback, all the resistance, all the back and forth. We can see what's going on today as an opportunity. So that's fine. All right, so let's start, Rohini, with the first theme, which is indeed around this backlash, around this the shift, this resistance, even though the resistance towards D&I is not something new. I mean, when I worked at BP, in 1998, I remember that I was always trying to convince managers, leaders about the business case. I remember that was the first time I heard about the notion of business case, and it was about, reassuring about the real business imperative. So it's not like resistance is a new topic. I think most of us, as part of this group, we all, throughout our career, be challenged because of resistance. So for you, Rohini, especially with your ability to look at the world, also, from a global perspective, but what are you seeing across the current landscape in the US, but also in Europe?
Yeah, so thank you very much for inviting me to this particular webinar, and it's a pleasure to be in conversation with you once again. We go back a long ways, and if I'm not mistaken, I was probably one of your first clients when you launched Pluribus. So I'm happy to be here with you. And also, I think the slides were very interesting because, so often we see the majority of participants from the United States. And I was very, very heartened to see so many participants from Europe and from other parts of the world. So I think that's, it gives a unique sort of depth and perspective. And your slide about, whether it's you see it as a positive or an opportunity, I think was also very interesting because what has happened is you asked me about, what I'm seeing around the world. And what is happening is that there are a lot of European companies that are actually calling and wanting to understand the landscape in the United States. So let me just start with that because there seems to be a fair amount of interest there. And what I have seen is that, there was this sort of flurry of activity and withdrawal from DEI. And now what I'm seeing is that people are re-engaging. And there was a particular study that I saw which said that, 1 in 3 companies that withdrew from, cut back their DEI budgets are now reinstating them. And 2 in 3 say that they faced consequences because they cut back. 2 in 3. I mean, that's pretty significant, either from employees or from their customers. And then 3 and 4 say that DI actually drove the bottom line. So it was a mistake. So they're re-engaging. So there was this flurry of activity of, panic, if you will. And why the panic? And I'm talking first in the United States, right? Because that's where a lot of this, turmoil is happening. I think the executive orders that came out earlier in this year, and there were 3 executive orders, sort of one after the other, that created a lot of panic. The first was in January to end wasteful DEI programs in the government. Okay, so that was one. The second is the executive order that stated that sex is biological, that there are only 2 sexes. And so, transgender employees were not recognized, for instance, in the military, etc. And then the third order was very significant. It was couched in language that said, we want to end illegal discrimination and restore merit-based opportunities. And in doing so, what happened was that it was sort of revoking President Johnson's executive order in 1965. So this was Executive Order 11246, which basically ensured equal opportunities for people of color, for women in federal government employment practices, and ensured that any of these practices refrained from discriminating against employees. So it's those 3 executive orders, one after the other, that caused this tremendous sort of angst and panic. And what happened was that sort of people started saying, well, we've got to cut DEI, but then paused and and started thinking about what this actually meant. And what I'm seeing organizations do is a couple of things. One is they're focusing inwards. So it's not about sort of performative statements being made, to the world about, all the money that's being given, etc. They're focusing inwards as we should around our workplace culture and employees. The second is to not draw attention. There is some renaming that's going on. So the words of diversity, equity, inclusion are now being changed to maybe inclusion, belonging, impact, words like that, okay? The third thing, which is really important, is, what is important in the United States is that organizations stay compliant with Title VII. And Title VII basically states that there should be no preferential treatment in any employment practices. Okay, so what they're looking to see that there is no preferential treatment. So for instance, if there was a leadership development program for women or mentoring for women, those are now being made open to everyone. Okay, and while stating that this is a leadership development program for women, we're going to talk about imposter syndrome. We're going to talk about these things, but men are welcome to join. Okay, so the aperture is being widened. And the other thing is that, there's sort of this going back to basics. Let's reevaluate and go back to the business case and to basics. And companies are doing a risk assessment. They're doing a risk assessment of their initiatives, but they're also doing a risk evaluation of how much risk they're willing to take. So there are companies like Disney or Costco who are saying, their shareholders are saying, we're going to stay by our values and what we believe in. Others are doing it, but doing it sort of under the radar. So talking about resistance, Isabel, there has always been resistance to DEI. These times are no different, okay? And there's always been this pendulum swing, right? Going from compliance to the business case to, making a case for social justice after the murder of George Floyd, to the backlash against what's called wokeism, and now back to basics in terms of making the business case. So I think DEI has always been agile, has always been responsive, and we've just got to be creative. This is a new time. We've got to look inward, see what we can do differently, and rise and respond. So, I mean, I think that resistance is the name of the game in this work. So. But so just to finish my thought. So this is in the United States, and I will say globally, and I think your data bears it out. In Europe, in other parts of the world, people are continuing because they believe that this is important. What they're doing is, trying to understand what's happening in the United States so that their subsidiaries can be compliant, particularly if they're federal government contractors. They don't want to, be on the radar and impact their business. But in Europe and other parts of the world, I think the work is continuing unabated. So,
thank you, Rohini. I mean, just on your point around the US and managing the risks. I mean, there is a recent study from Catalyst and Metzer Center, which is called "Risk of Retreat: The Enduring Inclusion Imperative," and that was done with 2,500 people in the US, and the reports really show all the risks if organizations, as you are rightly said, are posing or deciding to completely stop their initiative. And also, I would say in Europe, based on my experience, especially in countries like France or Belgium, since what's the geopolitics, the pressure, it seems that companies are, especially in France and in Belgium, are reactivating their D&I agenda. French people, I'm French, so I can say, they are rebel. They want to say, no, we want to affirm our commitment, our position. And it's true that in Europe, in general, the work that has been done is really about positive action rather than positive discrimination. So when you look at what is happening and the sort of initiatives, they are really towards positive action. So what are the means that organizations are putting in place to transform the culture, to embed inclusive behaviors? So it's also a part of...
Isabelle, if I can just say, I think it's the same in the United States. I think people get confused. They think affirmative action means quotas. It's about positive action. It's about removing the barriers that prevent people from advancing. It's about providing equal opportunities. And those are positive actions. And that's what affirmative action is, taking positive actions to ensure that people have equal opportunities.
So, in your experience, if you think about a moment where you have experienced a pushback, a resistance, how was it? How did you deal with it?
So, I mean, as I said, Isabelle, this work is all about resistance, right? So when I started, let's say I take my experience at Sodexo, and I've worked with many other companies, it was in the United States, and there was a lot of resistance. I remember very clearly that we actually posted some information in June for Gay Pride Month, and I actually got personal hate mail, and I'm talking about when I started, to say that I'm corrupting the morals of the company. This was in the United States. Fast forward from there to where Sodexo was seen as a leader, in DEI. I like to say we went from class action to best in class. So from a lawsuit that was pretty serious to really being seen as a leader. So along the way, obviously there's been resistance. And my take on this is that, change happens at the intersection of people and processes. So you've got to address those systemic barriers and processes, but you also have to impact people's mindsets. So I think the best way to illustrate it, is maybe through a quick story. And I remember very clearly that there was a particular leader. He was, based in London. He headed up, the European business. And he was my nemesis. I mean, he didn't believe in the data, whatever was shown to him with the business case. He was like, this is a waste of time. So what I had to do, and each leader has an ecosystem of beliefs. You have to understand what makes a person tick, what's in it for them, and then provide them with the experiences that help to incrementally shift them. So I got him involved in a cross-company mentoring program. And he mentored a woman from a different organization. And she shared her experiences with him. She shared what she had encountered being the only woman, single woman in the executive team, being marginalized, being talked over, and ultimately being dismissed. She was asked, she was laid off. And this was, they had built a trusting relationship. He listened to her lived experiences. And he came to me and he said, I cannot believe that in this day and age, women in these senior positions actually have these experiences. It's unacceptable. And so he said, what I want is for every person on my executive team to mentor a woman from a different part of the organization. And I think there were, 11 women or something in that particular mentoring program. Now, these women were all very capable. They were very capable. What this program did was to make them visible to the organization. And I have to say there was a ripple effect because it changed this leader's mindset, right? He became committed. He went on to a different organization and continued that drive for inclusion. But also what happened was of these 11 women, some 9 women went on to, have very senior leadership positions as country heads, as general managers, as leaders in, different functional areas. So, I think that, the resistance is there. I think you've got to address it, as I said, based on what the organization needs, based on what the leader needs. And I can share some more examples later about sort of the business, how you kind of make that business case. But certainly in this instance, I find that, dealing with sort of at the intersection of people and processes, addressing your processes, but also addressing key leaders is very critical. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much. It's very inspiring. But when you are talking about mindset, the mindset changing, transforming, changing the mindset is so critical. And I really believe you can do that when you have conversation as well. So resistance is real, and sometimes it's a signal. I remember talking about a story, every quarter we're holding a Pluribus World Café with all our global facilitators. And we were actually discussing that, resistance. What are we going to do? What? And someone said, you know what? Let's take this pushback as a feedback and learn from it. So it's a little bit what you just said in terms of, let's use it as an opportunity to go back to the roots and to have conversations. Recently, we held what we called face-to-face inclusive connections with one of our key partners in Brussels. It was end of March. And it was so powerful and inspiring just to have conversation, to be vulnerable, to share what was happening in their respective organizations, how people were maybe reframing. You were talking, Rohini, about belonging. I was hearing also culture change or engagement. So it was very interesting to understand also the different challenges that D&I practitioners, but also leaders are faced today because of what's going on. And there has been also another report, the Pulsely report, which is called the State of D&I 2025. And there were some key challenges that were identified. So because we have, I think now, around 67 participants, let's see maybe with the AHA slide, let's see you as participants are, people, D&I practitioner, D&I change agents from various organizations, different regions. Where do you see the biggest challenge you're facing today? So you can see that the information, so is it about increasing polarization and resistance, misinformation, lack of demonstrating measurable impact, maybe budget constraints. So you have all the list of different challenges that were identified as part of this big study. And also it will be either on the chat or part of the additional resource that we will send you after this webinar. So let's have a look. So it looks like lots of challenges, definitely. Let's see if one or two. Yeah, I'm not surprised to look at complexity and fatigue. Definitely, misinformation, yeah, or misinterpretation, yeah. So it looks at these two are probably the biggest challenges that you're facing in your respective organizations and teams.
And measuring demonstrable impact, I think that's an important one too.
Demonstrating measuring impact, which is also the connection with the business case.
Yeah.
Going back to this famous business case, but it's very important to be clear of why we're doing it. D&I is part of how you're driving a business. The D&I topic should be part of the ambition of the organization. Shouldn't be an initiative on the side. And I think this is where sometimes there is a misinterpretation. I think sometimes the communication around D&I activities could be seen as nice initiatives where they are totally embedded on how you want to transform your organization. So yeah, thank you so much for all the participants to share.
Isabelle, may I just read out this comment in the chat, which is very interesting. It says, second, if I can go up. Oops. Resistance often comes from a place of ignorance. My son, White, was adamant that discrimination was made up and the result of people being oversensitive until I asked him to take me to dinner and observe the behavior of the wait staff of the restaurant. As expected, the maitre d' asked him how many in the party and where we preferred to sit. Handed him the menu first, asked him what he wanted to order, including looking to him for my order, asked him how the food was after it arrived, and handed him the tab and check. He was astounded. He never noticed this before. So it's, it really is about providing people with experiences. I think that oftentimes, as a diversity practitioner, I would talk to leaders. It's not me talking to them that makes a difference. It really is about the experiences that they get immersed in. And that's a great example.
And most often, as I think it's Diane wrote, it's really about ignorance. I mean, yesterday, I don't know for the people who live in France or in Belgium who has access to the French TV, but there was an amazing TV report yesterday, which was called Are We All Racist? And that was done in France with 50 volunteers who didn't know they were going to be part of a test. And that was really to test their biases. And there was one activities where you had 4 chairs in a waiting room, and there were one white person and one black person in the middle, seated in the middle. And each time people were entering this waiting room, believe it or not, every single person were going to sit next to the white person without even knowing it. So the work around filtering our bias, raising our awareness is so important as well. So personal story, when you go through an experience is so important. So when we talk about the framing, the trust, I think personal story, and that was one of the questions from one of the participants. Personal story is so powerful, but in the current environment, how do you ensure that people can be safe talking about their stories?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, from whoever asked that question. I think that's really important. And I think that, oftentimes it's women, it's those that are marginalized, that are asked to educate others, right? And that's a big burden to bear because it is like coming out again and again and again and reliving the pain of your experience. So in my, experience, I think obviously it has to be voluntary. You have to be, use a lot of discretion as to when and how and where you're asking the person to share this personal story and really maximize the impact of that personal story. So you're not putting this person through, this ringer every single time. And then I think the organization, you've got to have that emotional intelligence and understand the culture of the organization, the ecosystem to know, is the leader, is the organization ready? Or are there going to be some repercussions for this individual sharing the story? And that's a judgment call that you have to make. As a change agent, you have to really make that call. So for instance, one organization that I worked at, there were this group of LGBTQ employees who really wanted to launch an LGBTQ a Pride ERG, Employee Resource Group. And I advised that organization to wait, to pause till the organization was ready. And when they were ready and when there were enough allies in that organization, Isabelle, that's when this, ERG was launched. And that's where there was then safety in sharing stories. In one particular instance, there was two transgender employees who shared their lived experiences, but this could not have been done at the start of the journey of DEI in this organization. It was done many, many years later when the organization was ready to be open to listening to the story of these transgender employees. And it had a profound impact on the CEO in particular. Profound impact. Would not have been the case earlier because I remember early on, having someone who was an ally from a different organization speak to the executive team of this company. And that, the executives in that organization were not ready to hear about LGBTQ. They said, this is a personal issue. Why do we have to bring it into the workplace? This has nothing to do with work. This is private, etc. But now, they were ready to talk about their employees who were LGBTQ. So I think you've got to really use judgment in how and where to ensure the safety of the individual and to also ensure that you're not leaning heavily. And I think that individuals from quotes unquote the mainstream, individuals who are the majority, who should take responsibility for their own learning as well, put themselves into situations that where they can learn and grow as well. And I mean, can I share one more very quick story?
Please.
So when I was, again, this is, I actually shared this in my book, the CEO of Sodexo, Denis Mechuel, he was my second, I reported into him. And I remember very clearly when I started launching race, ethnicity, work outside of the United States, he said to me, why are you diluting the focus on gender? Race doesn't translate outside the US in the same way. And he was absolutely right. It doesn't, for historical reasons, particularly in Europe, it does not translate in the same way. But I did realize that I wanted to, he needed to have some experience around what it means. So I invited him to an African American ERG meeting in the United States in Texas. To his credit, he took 2 full days to attend that meeting. He came to that meeting. He was one of 2 straight white French men at that meeting. He was one of a handful, maybe a dozen white men at that meeting. And he sat in this particular session where he listened to the lived experiences of senior Black leaders in the organization. And that combination of being a minority, being one of only, and listening to the lived experience was transformational for him. So he went on to send this very heartfelt message to the organization after the murder of George Floyd. Wouldn't have happened, if he had not allowed himself to be in that situation to learn. So I think, leaders also have to, and then what he did, which was really amazing. He went on one of his executive team meetings he had held in Atlanta at the Civil Rights Museum, and we had a behind the scenes private tour for the executives because he wanted others to get the same experience. So
this is so powerful. Thank you so much, Rohini. I think what you said is, on one hand, it's really about understanding the level of readiness. It's about understanding the right timing, but also, especially with the your last anecdote, it's really about the power of role modeling, the power of being vulnerable to say, I don't know, okay, I want to listen, give me the experience. And I think as D&I practitioner, it's also, and D&I change agent, our role is to find a way to create that empathy for people to open up their eyes, open up their ears, because sometimes, and we go back to this notion of ignorance, we don't know. Some people don't know. Talking about leadership, I mean, a few weeks ago, one of our key partners, key clients, where we are having a global rollout at the moment, and we had some workshops, a number of workshops also in the US, but all over the world. And even myself, I was saying, oh, maybe there will be some change. And then I understood that the CEO of that company said very loudly, and clearly, we are not changing anything. We are committed, and we want all our leaders to go through this experiential learning, so everyone can play a role. So when we talk about ownership, action, but also we can talk about internal champions. I think leaders have a role to play to walk the talk and to inspire people in the organization, employee managers, and also the D&I champions, the D&I ambassadors, who usually do this work on top of their duty. They do that. So the real change doesn't start, only from the top. It really needs to be embedded in everything we do, and it's very important to especially for champions, to have courageous conversation with these leaders who sometimes don't really know what to do. They are not too sure.
Yeah, can I ask you, I mean, that's a really interesting idea. So, obviously you work with organizations to look for these champions. So what do you actually look for when you're trying to, identify these inclusion champions? What are you looking for? What are some of the traits that you look for?
So usually, organizations are trying to identify some people within their respective organization in different regions, different business units, to play a role. So it's not just the corporate center who is saying you need to do that. So we help organizations to identify the right people with the skills that are needed to be a champions, as I said, on top of their other jobs. So it's really about people who are having, strong listening skills, who could hold courageous conversations. So knowing how to give and receive constructive feedback, for example, or being vulnerable as well. And we do lots of what we call application workshops for champions. We do lots of listening skills events also for other clients. But I think it's important not only to focus on the leaders, but to help especially ambassadors and champions who are the relay, the relays in the different parts of the organization, to have the skills that are needed so they can have conversation. So I'm just looking at the time, and we still have another 20 minutes. So we addressed, the backlash. We talked about the language. We just talked about the importance of ownership and leadership. Maybe if we think about the business impact, the scalability, the future readiness. We already talked about this just a little bit. How do you think people shift from passive support to really an active engagement? Do you have any
Yeah. So
controlling?
I think again, it's sort of understanding what the needs are of the organization and the individuals, right? So I shared a couple of stories about, personally how they shifted, right? Let me talk a little bit about what else works, right? So it is giving people experiences because, as I said, change happens at the intersection of people and processes, right? So giving people experiences. But I think it's equally important to demonstrate, and I think you said this before, that diversity has to be core to the business strategy. It's not something separate and apart from. What you have to talk about is how is diversity going to enable business outcomes and success? So, in one organization, we did this study, right, where we looked at gender balanced teams. And, we could have just looked at gender balanced teams and said, oh, gender balanced teams are better. But what we did was to look at the key performance indicators that were important to the business and correlated gender balanced teams or teams at 40 to 60% with those key performance indicators. So then it's sort of integrating it into the business, right? So it was about client retention, employee engagement, employee retention, financial outcomes, and safety. And each one of those five, we were able to show that teams, with 40 to 60% women outperform those with less than 40% women. So that is embedding it in the business. Also, if you're a business to business client facing organization, what you can do is to, show the impact of diversity on your business development. So if you can be a leader in diversity and make diversity a differentiator and a competitive advantage, then you can actually, bid, go put in your bids, in your RFPs, your response to proposals. You can actually talk about how you're a leader, and that is the differentiator from your competitor. So in fact, at Sodexo, the diversity team actually touched 1 billion. And this is the importance of quantifying, okay? Importance of quantifying $1 billion worth of business as a result of diversity. So it was either access to clients, and access to client meaning, let's say you're at BP, Isabelle, and, that Sodexo is bidding for a BP client, BP as a client. And, I go to you and I say, look, let's exchange and share best practices. And you invite me to come and speak to your executive team. And that helps to build the relationship, to position, this company as a leader. And then the business development people can go in and take over. But they've not had access to BP except through diversity. And that happened with a very large client. It was the largest facilities client, and the two CEOs of this client and of Sodexo had never met each other. But it was through diversity that we had an event, and the two CEOs met, talked not about food and facilities management, but about diversity, and that's where the connection was made. It sort of expands the sphere of influence. It helps the business development. It helps to get access to a potential client, and then you quantify it. That's when I put in front of the executive team that, the diversity team touched $1 billion worth of business. I can tell you at my retirement party, the two CEOs were there, and the one CEO sort of narrated the story. He said, when I took over from my predecessor, he said to me, he said, look, you can cut any part of any other function, but don't you dare touch the diversity budget. Because that CEO had seen that it benefited, the business and the company. But, honestly, Isabelle, these things have to be sustained. And it is ultimately about leadership, because if the leadership is not committed and doesn't make it a priority, it's very easy to slide back. So when I talk about a best practice, it's best practice at a moment in time. That best practice can go away just as fast as it was there. So you've got to keep focused. So
thank you. Thank you, Rohini, for sharing this powerful story, and I really encourage, that's definitely an inspiration for some of the participants, if they have a conversation with the leaders and they are able to quantify, take the time to quantify and make this business case, then we're talking business, and then it has an impact. So
absolutely.
so
May
much.
I Isabel, just share this one other comment in the chat, which I think is very fascinating. Someone says, I just posted about biases on LinkedIn yesterday, something that happened to me. A recruiter called me because I changed my name on LinkedIn. I did it to prove that one version of my name got more interest. They asked where I was from, and when I said India, they said, you don't sound Indian. Well, how do Indians sound when we have 22 official languages and over 200 mother tongues? If this doesn't tell you about unconscious bias in the hiring process, what does?
Wow.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. So I mean, I was going to ask the question. So what's your vision for beyond 2025? I mean, this is really a question. There's still lots of work to do to change the mentalities, to raise the awareness, to also allow ourselves to speak up, when something like that is happening. But I just realized that maybe, if you don't mind, let's see if there are any other questions from the participants. So it's we have 5 minutes or more for some questions. Do you have any questions? If you have one, just type it on the chat. If you have any questions.
I don't see any.
I don't see any.
No, there aren't any. I mean, I know you got a lot ahead of
Yes,
time.
we got a lot.
Okay.
There is one. How can we navigate out of this current storm? For many of us, it's our life purpose, and we are and continue to be resilient.
I'm sorry, I didn't see. Say that again. How?
So it's really about how can we navigate, in this storm? Because for most of us, for all of us,
how can I?
what we do with the topic of DNA is because it's our passion. So how we continue to be resilient? That's a real.
Yeah, I think, this work, and thank you for that question because we didn't get to that. But I think this work is about our life's work. It's also about us as people, right? Because this is a personal attack on us as, individuals, as human beings. So I think that clearly there are a couple of things that I do, and I can share that. One is to have a community of support. It's very important to belong to a community of support. Isabel, you talked about the pluribus sort of community where you can share your experiences, where you can get feedback, where you can get support. That to me is extremely critical. I think the other piece for me is really to be able to sort of tune out and refresh myself, whether it's refresh myself by being with family, whether it's refresh myself with travel or reading or whatever it might be. So to step back and distance myself a little bit, I think is also very critical. And then I think focusing on things that I can control. So I can control things at a more local level, and that's where I'm also focused. So I think it would be those sort of few suggestions that I would have to stay resilient, because I think taking care of yourself is like wearing the seatbelt, right? Wear the seatbelt on yourself, before you help others. So I think it's really important that you take care of yourself because this work is exhausting, and think of ways to recharge. So for me, it is, providing some distance. I like gardening, I like traveling, I like reading, being with family. And that's what gives me, helps me to recharge. So recharge yourself, focus on things you can control as well. And then I think most important is to have your community of support. I think that's critical.
Thank you for your wisdom and sharing this this kind of advice that are real. I mean, we and it's true, we know there are lots of studies that shows that DNI managers, DNI practitioners are overworked. They have some issues with mental health because there is too many things to do. Usually there are one person in an organization. So I like the fact that you say it's really about taking care of ourselves, because if we can as you said, take care of ourselves, then because of our values, then we can then help others to find their voice. I mean, why are we doing all that? It's because we want everyone to have their true voice, to be able to contribute to their organization, with authenticity and with no mask, no mold to no uniform. So yeah, so it's a journey.
So there is another question that's similar to what you asked me. What's next for DI inclusion belonging?
Exactly.
And somebody just said, thank you so much. The importance of recharging really resonated right now. So do you want me to go with that question? What's next?
What's next for you? So how do you see, beyond 2025? What do you see the future of D&I?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, this is a moment for us to pause and reimagine. So I'm extremely, extremely hopeful about the future of DI, very hopeful, because I think with this reimagining, it's forcing us to reimagine, to relook at things. I think we're going to come up with some more thought leadership, innovative ideas. So I'm very, very hopeful. I also think that the next generation, is not going to accept the rolling back and the pausing. They're going to want, the continuation of the commitment to DEI. So the next generation, both in terms of employees and customers, and, you saw that data that I shared, right, where I said that, companies are reinstating because 2 in 3 said they faced consequences from their employees and from their customers. So, this work is here to stay. I mean, there's no going back. But I think it's also a time to go back to basics, because in your poll that you did, Isabelle, one of the things that folks said was the confusion, right? There's sort of confusion, there's lack of understanding. So I think that is sort of equally important, that we clarify things. We clarify that diversity is what is, it's a given, right? Equity is about removing those barriers that prevent people from advancing. It's about giving opportunities to people. And inclusion is the act of creating a culture where everyone feels like they can succeed. And the outcome of all that is belonging, having a sense of belonging. It's the outcome of the inclusion and the equity, right? It's the culture where people can succeed and the removal of barriers. So explaining those terms, I mean, this is basically what we're doing. We're creating opportunities for everyone. We're removing barriers for everybody, because you remove barriers for women, it removes barriers for everybody, right? So I think that's important. And I think it's also important to go back to basics in terms of the impact on the business. That is very, very critical. Impact on the business. Whatever you do, that DEI is an enabler of business outcomes, and make that connection. If you're in a pharmaceutical company, how is DEI going to impact the diversity in your clinical trials? If you're in a consumer-facing company, quantify the market share through products that are marketed to underrepresented communities. If look at and consider how your initiatives are impacting the getting the right talent into the organization. So make sure you keep reinforcing that business impact. What's important to the business?
Thank you, Rohini. I'm really happy to hear your thoughts about what's going to happen beyond 2025, and I'm really happy to hear your optimism, and the fact that it's indeed an opportunity. I mean, you have so much experience, you have all this knowledge with so many organizations, and so when I hear you saying I'm very hopeful, it gives me lots of joy, because it has been, I must say, a little bit like an emotional roller coaster, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. It has been, yes, bad news, and then, oh, maybe it's an opportunity. Oh, yes, but this. So yeah, I'm quite hopeful, also to hear your views about that. And I agree. I think we need to go back to the fundamentals. We need to remind ourselves that inclusion is not a label, something that is abstract. It's really how we are able to unlock potential, how we can build trust, psychological safety for people to really be themselves. And then, as you said, connection with the business, because because they feel better, they will be able to get the best out of them. So, very hopeful. Thank you. So we're going to close now in a few minutes. We still have 4 minutes to wrap up a bit. I mean, obviously, the participants will receive a follow-up email. You will have access to the webinar recording. You will have different resources. And then please, use the QR code to give us your feedback as well about this webinar. I mentioned that we are launching this series, so there will be the next one probably early September with another topic, to even go deep, in a deep dive on different topics. So yeah, you can, it only takes 30 seconds, but it will be helpful for us. So before we close, Rohini, and first of all, thank you so much for all your insights. But if you had to pick one insight from this conversation today that you want, people to live with, what would it be?
I think leave with a sense of hope. I know that it's difficult in these times, but we're counting on each and every one of you to stay resilient. We need you, and we'll get through this. As I said before, this field has always been agile, always been responsive, and will continue to be. We've weathered these storms before. This is not new. So, hang in there, take care of yourself, stay resilient. And I know that, this is going to come back in a better iteration. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Rohini. I totally aligned. You gave me hope, you gave me energy, and I really hope that this positive energy, has been transferred to the participants, even though it's online. I mean, for me, the key insight is this notion of perseverance, persistence, and resilience. And I will keep take care of ourselves. We need to, really make sure that we are taking care of ourselves.
Someone is saying the Catalyst link is not working, but we can deal with that later.
Okay, all right. We'll make sure that everything will be part of the document. The resource document will be sent to everyone. So thank you, everyone. I mean, I'm so glad because the conversation was very rich because of all your stories, Rohini. And yet we are on time, which is for me really respecting schedule. So we have this 1 minute to say, really thank you, Rohini, for again your wisdom, your positivity, and really very thankful for that. Thank you to everyone who participated today, and we will all keep digging into the real work of inclusion. So it's about having the courage, being practical, but most importantly, together, not just alone, but really together. So next webinar probably in September. Watch out for some announcement. We'll tell you more in the next few days. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabelle, and thank you to all of you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.